Good morning, everyone. We were studying this week's the Torah portion of Vaera, the second portion of the book of Shemot. We're starting from the book Selections of Likutei Sichos, the second talk of the Rebbe. We are going to delve into a discussion about Passover, the different numbers of 3 and 4, and the different consumption parts that appear on that are required on Passover, which are matzah and wine. And why matzah? We have 3 matzah, and wine we have 4 cups. What do they represent, and why cannot be only one of the numbers, either all of them 4, all of them 3, etc. It all stems from this week's Torah portion. So I'm starting to read. Our sages state that the 4 cups of wine which we are ordained to drink on Passover night, correspond to the 4 promises of redemption stated at the beginning of this week's Torah portion. Here are 4 times God is using different language to promise a redemption, and for each one of the 4, we drink one cup. I will bring you out, I will deliver you, I will redeem you, and I will take you out. So you have ve'otzeti, ve'itzalti, ve'ga'alti, ve'lakachti. Each one is a different type of Exodus, and therefore for each one time that God had promised to deliver the Jewish people out of Egypt, we have 1 cup of wine. Mordechai is a famous sage that lived, I believe, at the 11th century. Questions. Extending that logic, shouldn't 4 matzahs be required? Since eating matzah on Pesach night is scriptural commandment, recalling that our ancestors were redeemed from Egypt, that's the reason we eat matzah, to remember that they came out of Egypt. It would similarly have been more appropriate to ordain taking 4 matzahs at the Seder in correspondence with the 4 promises of redemption. Mordechai is asking, if you have 4 languages, 4 types of redemptions, talk about matzah. Take 4 matzah to the Seder, not 3. Mordechai continues, for this reason, there are commentaries that explain that the 4 cups correspond with the 4 cups of salvation. In other words, because of the difficulty Mordechai mentioned, these commentaries interpret the 4 cups of the Seder as corresponding to the 4 cups of salvation, which are not related to bread and not to the 4 promises of redemption, which could also be seen as related to matzah. Says the Rebbe, the Mordechai explains that when we talk about the 4 languages, the 4 types of redemption, the Torah calls it 4 cups of redemption. It's called kos, and therefore it's related to drinking wine versus eating matzah. So therefore we drink 4 cups of wine. Says the Rebbe, nevertheless, the difficulty raised by Mordechai must be resolved according to all authorities, and particularly according to the above-mentioned reasoning that is cited by the Alter Rebbe as halacha in Shulchan Aruch, that the 4 cups correspond to the 4 promises of redemption. If you say the 4 languages correspond to the 4 cups of redemptions, then you can connect it to the wine and exclude matzah. But Code of Law, Alter Rebbe writes in Code of Law, the reason we drink 4 cups of wine is because of 4 languages of redemption. If it's 4 languages, it's not unique to wine. It also can be connected to matzah. So how come we eat matzah only 3? And when it comes to redemption, the Torah uses 4 languages of redemption. And that's what the rabbi wants to do. The rabbi wants to make sure that we understand that within redemption, 3 parts will have to do with matzah, and the 4th one exclusive to wine and not to matzah. The halacha is that 3 matzahs are required for the Seder. The rationale is that 2 whole matzahs are required, over which to begin the meal as another festivals. Every festival you need to have lechem mishneh, meaning double bread. You need to have a blessing on 2 breads, so you have 2 matzahs. and one additional broken matzah, recalling the bread of affliction. In other words, why do you have 3 matzahs on the Seder? For practical reason. You need to have 2 complete bread like you need on every Shabbat holiday. Then the third one is actually a broken matzah. You break it, you put away 1/2, because a bread of affliction, a bread of poverty is not a complete bread. So therefore you add another one. Alternatively, another reason is given by Mordechai that the 3 matzahs recall the 3 types of unleavened bread that accompany the Thanksgiving offering at the Beit HaMikdash. There's another reason. In the Holy Temple, when anyone would bring a thankful offering, they would have to bring 3 types of bread. And therefore tonight, the Seder is about thanking God, recalling all the good that he did. We take 3 breads to correspond to the 3 breads that were brought with the thankful offering.
We take 3 matzahs.
3 matzahs. To add a further point, every Torah concept is precise in all its aspects. Thus, it is logical to say that the number of matzah, 3, does not merely result from the external factor which we just spoke, that 2 because of lechem mishneh and another one for bread of poverty or as a thankful offering. Rather, just as the number of cups of wine, 4, is integrally associated with the cups allusion to the 4 promises of redemption, so too the number of matzahs is integrally associated with the rationale for eating matzah in general, to recall that our ancestors were redeemed from Egypt. So the Rebbe, the number 3 is very precise, and it must be for a much deeper meaning than just the external reasons. Just like cups, you have 4 cups of wine corresponding to 4 cups of redemption. The same is matzah, you have 3 for a particular reason.
So why do we take the middle matzah and not the bottom ones to break? If there's supposed to be 2 for the motzi, why would you not take the bottom one, take a break?
So here's the reason. You make a blessing, you need to have 2 whole matzahs.
Yeah.
That's the first blessing, a motzi lechem haaretz. Then you make a blessing on matzah. By the time you make a blessing on matzah, it must be a bread of poverty. Bread of poverty cannot be complete bread. So what do? You drop the bottom matzah and you're holding a matzah and a half.
You're holding a matzah in half, so you're
By the
holding
time you make the second blessing. In other words,
matzah in the first matzah.
right. Did you understand that?
I understand it.
Okay,
Every day.
so let's make sure we
No, the
understand.
bottom is dropped.
You have 3 matzahs. The middle matzah is a broken matzah. And the reason is for practical reason. When you make the blessing before you eat the matzah, you make 2 blessings. One is a motzi lechem min haaretz for bread,
Right.
and you need to have lechem mishneh. You need to have 2 complete matzah. So you're holding all 3, and therefore you make a blessing for 2 bread. Then the second blessing is for a bread of poverty. It's called a motzi matzah, right? So by that time, when you make a second blessing, you cannot hold 2 complete breads. You need to have a broken bread because it's a bread of poverty. So what do? While holding the 3, after the first blessing, you drop the last blessing, the last matzah, the low matzah, and you're holding a matzah and a half.
Makes complete sense.
Okay, let's continue. Whose phone is this?
I think it's the guys who do music or something. I think the guys, isn't there somebody working with it? It's not one. Can you go see?
Says the Rebbe, based on the above, it follows that there are 2 motives involved in the redemption from Egypt. One motive associated with 3 elements. This aspect of redemption is expressed by eating matzah, which requires taking 3 matzahs, and a second motive that is associated with 4 elements corresponding to the 4 promises of redemption, which is why our sages ordain us to drink 4 cups of wine. Says the Rebbe, based on what we just discussed, that in Torah there is no external reason. There must be a real intrinsic connection between 3 matzahs. There must be an intrinsic connection with 4 cups of wine. What's the connection? Even though there are 4 languages, we see that those 4 languages are connected to 4 cups of wine and not matzah. We need to understand what is the 3 and what are the 4. Says the Rebbe, it is possible to offer, we're on page 90, it is possible to offer the following explanation as to why the number 3 is associated with the matzah and the number 4 is with the cups of wine. As is well known and explained in Torah literature, the Jews were not worthy of redemption at the time of Exodus. Their spiritual state had declined so drastically that had they remained in Egypt for another moment, they would have been entirely submerged in the impurity of Egypt, in the 50 gates of impurity, a state from which redemption would have been impossible. It was only that in a blink of an eye, before they reached that stage, God took the Jews out of impurity of Egypt. The King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, revealed Himself to them and redeemed them. It can be explained that this is the meaning of the concept that the Exodus from Egypt was consummated only at the giving of the Torah. Only then did the impurity depart in a complete sense. So what did the rabbi say? It is a well-known stated fact that the Jewish people who were so submerged in impurity in Egypt, adopting the traditions and the customs of Egyptian deity, worshiping Egyptian idols, and adopting the customs, that in a blink of a second they had to be redeemed, not a moment too soon. If God would delay one moment, it would be too late for them to get out. In addition, God, in His great kindness, took them out at the very last chance. There is no other chance. And a minute later would be a lost chance. But in order for them to cleanse themselves entirely from the impurity of Egypt, they took the process of 49 days, and the completing of their cleansiness took place at the time God gave the Torah. Is that clear so far?
That's a question you might want to.
Yes.
Why did 80% of us stay behind?
Okay, this is not the discussion here. This concept is also reflected in the 4 promises of redemption. The fourth and last of those promises, I will take you to myself as a people, is referred to and was fulfilled through the giving of the Torah. Says Rabbi, pay attention to the 4 languages of redemption. You see that the first 3 are dealing with getting out of Egypt. But the 4th one is Velakachti etchem li le'am. I will take you on to becoming my people. And that happened only when God gave us the Torah. So it's something that did not happen directly when they left Egypt, but would have happened 49 days after. The purpose and consummation of the Exodus from Egypt was for the Jews to depart entirely from the impurity of Egypt. And that happened, the complete redemption happened when God gave us the Torah. This was accomplished during the days before the Exodus and the giving of the Torah, between the days, the Exodus and the giving of the Torah, when they prepared themselves to receive the Torah, refining themselves until they were befitting of the title, a holy nation. So when God took us out of Egypt, number 1, it was the very last chance. Number 2, in the 4 languages, the first 3 is about getting out of Egypt physically. The number 4 is about receiving the Torah, which will take which will happen later. But that's the completion of the project of taking people out of Egypt. In other words, refining themselves, purifying themselves, reading themselves out of all the impurity that took a while to be achieved. And only then God takes us into a people. On this basis, a distinction can be made between the matzahs and the 4 cups of wine. Matzah emphasizes the dimension of the redemption from Egypt that came about not so much as a result of the divine service of the Jewish people, but rather as a divine initiative. This is implied by the wording of the Haggadah, this matzah that we eat. What is the reason? Because the dough of our ancestors did not have time to rise before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, revealed Himself to them and redeemed them. Says the Rebbe, and I'm going to summarize what is discussed soon. Now we can understand the distinction between matzah and wine. Matzah is a bread of affliction. It refers to humility. You humble yourself. Humility is a receptacle for God's blessings. It's all about God's activity, and we are there to receive the blessing. And therefore, the first three of the four languages is about God acting. God is redeeming. God is going to save us. God is going to bring us out of Egypt. God is doing. What are we doing? We are receptacle for God's blessing. You sit there idly and wait for God to do. What is the matzah? The matzah cannot have a taste. The matzah must be flat and must have only bread and, flour and water. What if I add salt to the matzah or cinnamon flavor? Matzah is not kosher. You cannot do it. Because the first three refers to God's activity. It's called Itaruta de le'ela, coming from above. God is doing it. And therefore, God is active and we are the recipient. And that's why that's why we take 3 matzahs. When it comes to wine, the only reason, what's the powerful uniqueness of wine is that wine is affecting the person who is drinking. When do you drink? What happens? It alleviates pain, right? It makes you feel good. It makes you enjoy life. It releases all the tension. In other words, wine represents a part of that affects the human. Because the fourth one, I will take you into my people, making you my nation, the number 4 took a while. Why did it take a while? Because it depends on us. We have to put the effort. We have to change. We have to stop behaving like an Egyptian. We have to make a covenant with God. In other words, now you need to tango. You can't just have God do everything. We need to put our effort. That's number 4. And therefore, how many cups of wine do we drink? 4. It's a number 4. How many matzah we take? 3. Because 3 represent the first 3 that God has done. Is there any question to that? Let's continue.
Is that why you don't salt matzah like you would normally salt?
Uh-huh.
Is that why you don't use salt on matzah when you say matzah?
Of course.
Yeah.
So there should be no taste. So the first time you eat matzah, you do not dip it or spread around that salt because you don't want. No, the rabbi is bringing another point here. If someone had forced a person to eat matzah, they held his nose and opened his mouth and then make him chew or make him swallow the matzah. He fulfilled the mitzvah of eating matzah. But what if I did a flavorful matzah and I love and enjoy it? I did not fulfill the mitzvah of matzah. Why? The idea of matzah is all from above, and the human interaction is just to be a receptacle, to receive it. As soon as you interfere and add a human component, you're missing the idea of matzah. But when it comes to wine, the more flavors, the merrier. The greater the taste the wine, the greater you fulfill the mitzvah. Because wine is about our activity. And therefore, that's why it took 49 days. And it represents the last part. And therefore, you have 4 cups of wine. Matzah represents the first part, the first 3 parts. The first 3 parts, it's not us, it's God is doing. Therefore, from the 4 languages, you see the division between the first 3 and the 4th. Here is the summary when the rabbi is explained this at page 93 in the middle. For this reason, there are 3 matzahs corresponding to the first 3 promises of redemption, because matzah emphasizes the redemption that comes from God. By contrast, there are 4 cups of wine to highlight the dimension of the redemption that is brought about by and internalized within the divine service of the Jewish people. Therefore, the 4 cups also reflect the 4th promise of redemption: I will take you to myself as a people. For this reason, the scriptural mitzvah of Passover night, is only eating matzah and not drinking the 4 cups of wine. The reason is that the Exodus from Egypt commemorated Pesach night only the first 3 aspects of redemption, that is, the redemption as it comes from above, were expressed. It was not until the giving of the Torah that the 4th dimension was fully achieved. Did you understand what I just read? Let me just add one more dimension that the rabbi is saying. That's why the eating of matzah is a mitzvah that God gave us. The drinking of 4 cups of wine, nowhere in the Torah. Where did it come from? It's rabbinic enactment. The rabbi is addressing this. The rabbi is saying, why is this that the 4 cups of wine is rabbinic enactment and the matzah is a Torah? If it's corresponding to the redemption, it should be both the same. Says the Rebbe, because wine represents the 4th one. What's the 4th one? Coming from us, from below. In other words, we have to connect to God. We have to change. Therefore, the rabbis have to enact that. If God were to make us a commandment to drink 4 cups of wine corresponding to 4 types of redemption, then the 4th one is not coming from us, it comes from God. Therefore, the 3 matzahs are God's commandment, and therefore it's God's activity. The matzah has no taste, no flavor. You eat it, it represents humbleness, humility that allows for God to penetrate and affects us. The 4th language of redemption is we are connecting to God, turning back to God, and then He will take us to the nation. Therefore, what corresponds to the 4th? The 4 cups of wine. Therefore, it's the rabbi's enactment because it came from us. Now, Rabbi wants to go even much farther. This is Kabbalah, and I think it's worth sharing. Says the Rebbe, deeper, on a deeper level, the inner connection of matzahs with the number 3 and cups of wine with the number 4 can be explained as follows. The Rebbe says the number, why didn't God use 6 and 7 or 8 and 9 number? What's 3 and 4? There's something unique to 3 and 4 in particular. The Hebrew letters also serve as numbers. The difference between the number Gimel, 3, and Dalet, 4, is reflected in our sages' association with those letters with the phrase Gmol Dalim. Gimel, Gmol Dalim means be kind, show kindness to the poor, exactly. Gmol is show kindness, and Dalim, Dal, is one of the names of a poor people. There are 4 ways to describe poverty in Hebrew. One of them is Dal. The Gimel, 3, is associated with Gmol, show, the giver, show kindness, while Dalet, 4, is associated with Dal, the poor, that is, the recipient. So 3 and 4, the Gemara says, correspond to Gimel and Dalet. And the Talmud tells us that it comes from the verse, Gmol Dalim, show kindness to the poor. So Dalet represent the poor. Gimel represent the helper, the one who is kind enough to show kindness. So number 3, redemptions represent God as He came to us and helped us. And Dalet represent the poor person. Number 4 represent the recipient, the Jewish people who are connected to God. Ali, did you understand that? Makes sense, right? I'm skipping, he's talking about father and mother, the difference between father and mother, we're going to skip. And there is this distinction between cooked matzah with flavor that's not fulfilled the mitzvah, but matzah, someone who's forced to eat is fulfilled the mitzvah, and I explained that as well. And the rabbi concludes, we're going to conclude here, the rabbi concludes that this is the difference between matzah and wine. Matzah represents accepting God's yoke. And therefore, the beginning of the matzah, God is asking us to eat the matzah, to representing the yoke of God, accepting ourselves. Wine, after you accept God's yoke, is to connect to God and understand why, and try and find a reason, and submerge ourselves with the study of Torah and connecting to God. That's the difference between 3 and 4, Gmol Dalim. That's why there are 4 languages of redemption, but only 3 associate with matzah, and the 4th. Now we understand the Mordechai's question can be answered in a totally different Kabbalistic way. It's not just represented in the thankful offering. It's not just because the word redemption is associated with cups. It's because the number 3 and 4 really connects to the matzah and wine, respectively. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yes, your question, sort of.
Yes.
Not-
Thank you, Rabbi.